Welcome to the None But Curious podcast. We're all about finding inspiration in life's uncertainties. Whether you're still figuring things out, questioning your beliefs, or just curious about the world, come hang out with us as we celebrate the beauty of not having all the answers. There's a particular kind of discomfort that's hard to explain. Nothing is technically wrong. No crisis, no obvious loss, and yet something just feels off. It's subtle. You wake up with a heaviness that doesn't announce itself loudly, but it lingers like a faint shadow. You move through your day slightly detached, as if you're watching yourself from a few inches outside your body. You scroll, you answer emails, you make dinner, you show up, you do all the things you're supposed to do. But beneath it all is a looming question. Why doesn't this feel like enough? This kind of dissatisfaction is hard to pin down. It doesn't hand you a clear problem to solve. It doesn't point to a single moment you can blame. And because we live in a culture obsessed with solutions, we often assume the discomfort must mean that something is broken. So we try to fix it. We rearrange our routines. We sign up for something new. We buy something or some things. We start a 5-step plan. We reinvent ourselves on a Tuesday. We convince ourselves that if we just tweak one more thing, upgrade one more habit, optimize one more corner of our lives, that feeling will disappear. But what if nothing's wrong? What if this feeling isn't a problem, but a signal? The philosopher Alain de Botton writes about this kind of restlessness in the Consolations of philosophy. He explores how thinkers across history wrestled with the ache of being human, the sense that life is both beautiful and slightly misaligned, and that we are always reaching for something just beyond our grasp. Socrates questioned everything because something felt incomplete. Seneca wrote about anxiety in the middle of privilege. Schopenhauer argued that even when we get what we want, satisfaction fades quickly, like water slipping through cupped hands. In other words, existential dissatisfaction is not new. De Botton often points out that philosophy isn't there to make our discomfort go away. Instead, it helps us see things in a different light. Philosophy reminds us that these uneasy feelings aren't a failure or something to fix right away. They're part of being alive and moving through the world as things keep changing. And I find that comforting because when nothing feels right, the temptation is to assume we failed at life, that we missed a sign, that we should have been further along by now, that everyone else seems to know what they're doing while we're silently unraveling in the grocery store. But maybe that feeling is just what happens when we start noticing the bigger questions stirring underneath everyday life. There's a beautiful reflection on Tiny Buddha titled Feeling Off? It's Okay. The premise is simple. Sometimes you feel off because you're in between versions of yourself. Not broken, not lost, just in transition. The article suggests that we don't always need to label the feeling or immediately transform it. Sometimes we just need permission to say, I don't feel quite like myself right now. And then just let that be true. We've gotten really used to trying to optimize every feeling we have. If we're a little down, we feel like we should lift our mood. If we're uncertain, we rush to find clarity. If we're bored, we reach for something to stimulate us. And if we're restless, we assume there must be something we need to fix. But what if, instead of rushing to fix it, we just stayed with it for a while? Stayed in that gray space, sat with the not quite clear parts. Let it be there without immediately turning it into another problem to solve. Now, there's a difference between depression and existential restlessness, though they do overlap. If you're struggling deeply, please seek support. But know that many of us experience seasons where life looks fine on paper and still feels slightly misaligned. This isn't failure. It just may be a recalibration. Think of it like your inner compass adjusting, an internal reorientation, a subtle shift in what feels true or meaningful. When nothing feels right, you might be outgrowing something invisible, a role, a rhythm, a version of yourself you've been carrying out of habit, an expectation you never consciously chose. Growth is often very quiet and very subtle. There's no announcement, no dramatic soundtrack, just a sense that the old skin doesn't quite fit. And that can feel really, really uncomfortable. I've noticed when I rush to fix that feeling, I usually overshoot. I make dramatic decisions to escape the discomfort. I rearrange my life like a room I'm convinced will feel better if I just move that couch one more time. And sometimes that creates chaos where patience would have created clarity. So, what if instead of forcing solutions, we lean into the feeling? What is this feeling trying to protect? What is it asking for? Rest? Novelty? Honesty? Space? A slower pace? A deeper connection? A boundary you've been afraid to set? Sometimes dissatisfaction is grief for a self you've outgrown. Sometimes it's a hunger for meaning. Sometimes it's simply fatigue. Sometimes it's the realization that you've been living on autopilot. But we don't find out by panicking, we find out by listening. Philosophers call this existential angst. Psychologists might call it liminality, the space between what was and what will be. I kind of think of it as a hallway. You've left one room, you haven't entered the next, and hallways are awkward places to live. They echo, they're narrow, they aren't decorated for comfort, and they're not meant to be permanent. They're passageways. If you ever moved homes, ended a season of work, shifted identity, or even just matured over time, you know this feeling. Nothing's dramatically wrong, but something is definitely rearranging beneath the surface. And rearranging takes energy. One of the most radical things we can do in these seasons is resist the urge to narrate catastrophe. Instead of saying, my life is off track, we might say, I'm in transition. Instead of, I need to fix this, we might say, I need to sit with this. Instead of, something's wrong with me, we might say, something is shifting within me. Sitting is not passive, it's attentive, intentional. It's allowing your inner world to speak before you drown it out with noise. Maybe this is a week for slower walks. Maybe this is a season for journaling without conclusions. Maybe this is a moment to admit you're unsure and just let it be. And there's something about not rushing to solve yourself, about trusting that clarity often arrives after patience, about recognizing that discomfort can be a compass. De Botton suggests that philosophy doesn't remove sorrow or restlessness. It teaches us how to hold them without shame. And the reflection from Tiny Buddha echoes that. Feeling off doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're paying attention. Sometimes dissatisfaction is simply awareness expanding faster than your circumstances. Your inner world has grown, and your outer world hasn't caught up yet. That lag can feel like discontent, but it's likely evolution. You don't have to reinvent your life right this second. You don't need a dramatic pivot. You don't need to diagnose every single emotion. All you may need is just time. Oh, and it's so hard. You may just need time to listen, time to name what's shifting, time to let the hallway lead somewhere new, time to let your inner world and outer world realign. That dissatisfaction can actually be a sign that something inside you is still awake. It means that you haven't numbed yourself out. You're still paying attention, still sensitive to what matters, still open to the possibility that life might hold something more. So if you notice that faint ache, that hard to name feeling that something's a little off, that small inner nudge that something might be shifting, just try something simple. Take one slow breath and say to yourself gently, it's okay to be in the in-between. You don't have to rush to understand it. Some seasons are simply here to move us somewhere new. Thanks for listening. As always, if this episode resonates, please feel free to share. You can also subscribe at None But Curious. You can visit my website at nonebutcurious.org, or just keep showing up, as that's the most important thing, right? Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time. And until then, stay curious.